Hello guys, in this video we are going to discuss a very good editorial from Times of India. So the title is Factory Act. Okay, so if I look at this editorial, it is basically providing a deep analysis of US President Donald Trump's call for American companies to shift their manufacturing entirely to the United States. So they are moving away from the global supply chain. So the idea, it's politically charged, but it carries significant implications for global trade, economic policies, and India's manufacturing sector. So this editorial is basically analyzing all these dimensions. So what I'll do is I'll start with a question. I'll give you a mains model question. So you go through that, okay, and then we will look at the editorial from that perspective. So you will understand the relevance of this particular editorial. Okay, so this is the question which I have actually prepared for this topic. So as you see here in the screen, discuss the impact of protectionist policies on global trade with special reference to the US push for reshoring manufacturing. So how can India leverage this shift to boost its own manufacturing sector? So you need to know what is protectionist policies. Of course, in GS3 it is connected, and they can ask you in interview also, they can ask you related to essay also. So you need to give an introduction on, you have to define what is this protectionist policies and their global implication, the implication on India. And then you need to discuss here, analysis of reshoring the manufacturing in the US. And then you need to talk about how the global supply chain disruptions will happen here. And then you need to discuss about the opportunities and the challenges for India in this context, and then various policy measures which are needed for India to capitalize on the shift. So you can summarize the strategic importance for India and the need for targeted reform. So this is how your answer should look like. So I'm not giving this discussion in the proper answer structuring format. I gave you the structure which you can follow, but what I'll do is I'll help you to analyze the editorial in a proper way. So that's actually the objective of this particular session. I hope this is very clear. So we can get into the editorial. I hope you can take the editorial after this and you can read and you will understand. So the editorial is basically, talking about the broader context of, economic nationalism, protectionism, where the nations normally attempt to safeguard their local industries by imposing tariffs or encouraging domestic manufacturing. You may go for a quota restriction, various tariff restriction, tariff or non-tariff barriers, etc. So Trump is proposing, it's an extension to his that America first strategy, which is again aimed to revitalize US manufacturing. So the idea is very simple: bring back all the jobs to American soil, reduce dependency on the global markets, and strengthen the local economy. So that's a very simple idea. So that's what I mean by economic nationalism or protectionism, safeguarding jobs and everything, right? But is it truly feasible in the interconnected global economy of this 21st century? That's actually the question. So that's where this editorial in fact providing a critical perspective that they are emphasizing on some dimensions here. So you can talk about first one, you can see related to global supply chain. That's the backbone of modern manufacturing. So this editorial is emphasizing the modern manufacturing process, which is deeply connected and embedded in global supply chains. So a single product such as smartphone or a car, that involves multiple stages of production across different countries. So some parts will be produced in China, some will be in India and assembled in Vietnam, like that. So that kind of interconnected world we are living in. So that's the kind of supply chain which is also interconnected. For instance, the components of an iPhone are taken more than from 43 countries. Display screens are from Japan, semiconductors from Taiwan, and assembly primarily happens in China. So this is this kind of geographical spread that optimize the cost and leverage the specialization also. And shifting all this back to US is not only economically challenging, but it will in fact disrupt the established supply networks already, right? So here is where, if you look at the UPSC perspective, GS paper 3, globalization versus protectionism, very important. And essay paper, if I can give you a question, globalization, connecting or dividing the world. So, or they can ask you like this: globalization, connecting or dividing the world. Discuss how global supply chain integrate multiple economies and the implications of dismantling them. I'll give you this question. You can just take down this question. So here, I'll share the screen and I'll give you the question. So here is the question, guys. Go through this. Just 1 minute. So here is the question. Go through this. This is a question. Okay, so this is an essay question, or it can be in GS paper 3 also. Globalization, connecting or dividing the world. So that in itself is a question in essay, or you can add this dimension also. Discuss how global supply chain integrate multiple economies and implications of dismantling this. Okay, so that's a question which you can actually prepare. So I hope you got enough points and valid points from the editorial. When you go through that, you will get more. So again, you can also talk about feasibility of domestic only manufacturing. So here, this is another dimension which the editorial is talking about. The editorial, questions the feasibility of reshoring the entire industries back to the US, which is difficult, right? And there are many hurdles like cost of labor, infrastructure readiness, technological dependency, and everything. So manufacturing in US significantly more expensive due to the higher labor cost compared to countries like China, Taiwan, Vietnam, or China, Vietnam, India, right? So again, if you talk about infrastructure readiness, years of outsourcing have that basically led to underdeveloped manufacturing infrastructure within the US. So US don't have that, they are not self-sufficient, of course, and technological dependency. Many technologies are again now concentrated in certain regions like East Asia, right? So breaking away from these hubs, that have to require massive investment also. So again, you can connect it with GS paper 3, impact of labor cost on global competitiveness, essay paper, economic nationalism versus global interdependence. So I'll be adding these two questions also, so you can just take it down. So I have added these two questions as well here. So GS paper 3, impact of labor cost on global competitiveness, and essay paper, it is the economic nationalism and global interdependence. So just take it down, and then I hope you get enough points for that also. Cool. So now another dimension that they're talking about is the implications for international trade and the economic diplomacy. So see, the protectionist measures, whenever you talk about that, often lead to trade wars, like what we have seen in case of US China recently, and the tariff issues and the strained international relation. So in this also, the editorial in fact draws parallel with the US China trade war that resulted in economic setbacks for not only both these countries but also the markets are across the world as well, right? So for India also, if you see this scenario, that opens good challenges as well as an opportunity. So if you see, when the tariff was imposed, I think 2 million iPhones has been airlifted from India immediately, right? So that's the advantage which we got. So opportunities are there. India can position itself as an alternative to Chinese manufacturing, or leveraging initiatives like Make in India, production linked incentive schemes, and all these things I have discussed already in the previous session. But what are the challenges? India would also need to, have the proper infrastructure, which we don't have. You need skill development and regulatory environment, the ease of such regulation to attract the global manufacturers also. So in this perspective, this is very important. Your GS paper to international relation, the impact of trade wars on diplomatic ties. GS paper 3, manufacturing sector in India, the potentials and the challenges. Interview questions on how India can capitalize on global supply chain shift. So I'm adding these three questions also to you so that you can just take it down. I hope that will add more value. So here you go. I'm adding these three questions also to what we discussed so far. So these are the three questions: international relation related, impact of trade war on the diplomatic ties, and then manufacturing sector in India, the potentials and the challenges, and then interview question which is related to global supply chain shift. Okay. So now again, when we look at this editorial, again it is giving another dimensions also related to India stance on the global manufacturing. So it is talking about how India must leverage the global restructuring of supply chain, right? Focus on ease of doing business and cutting this red tapism, efficient bureaucracy, and then enhance the Skill India initiative to supply a skilled workforce, which is very much required, expand the special economic zones and the industrial corridors, basically to attract the global investors, and push forward with digital India to modernize manufacturing through industry like 4.0 technologies like that. So again, if you look at this dimension, which is relevant for your GS paper 3, this is how you need to connect it, right? Industrial policies and socio-economic implication, essay, make in India versus global supply chain. So a strategic balance. So I'm adding these two questions also regarding this particular dimension which we have discussed. So from an editorial, we are, making now this much dimensions. So you can see here, I'm adding a couple of questions here. So industrial policies and their socio-economic implication, and then make in India a global supply chain, a strategic balance. Cool. So another two questions which we got in that topic related. Now, again, if you see the key takeaways from this, what we discussed is, see, you need to be prepared to answer questions on globalization versus protectionism in mains. And then you need to understand India's competitive advantages and the bottlenecks in manufacturing. And you need to be aware of the significance of global supply chain and their impact on domestic policies, and be ready to discuss India's strategic positioning in global trade, despite all these shifting economic policies and other things in your essay, in your GS paper 2, GS paper 3, and in your interview also. So see, to conclude this discussion, what we can say is, this editorial, the Factory Act, in fact, it's a very good editorial, right? It is serving a powerful reminder of the intricate web of global supply chains and the difficulties of unilateral protectionist policies. And for India, this is a moment of opportunity. If we can address its own structural challenges and the systemic issues, we can emerge as a global manufacturing hub. You can attract investment, you can attract, forex and, that are reconsidering their, China-centric operations. So many will be planning to shift also when such kind of tariffs are imposed on China, may shift to India. We can get that opportunities if the challenges are addressed. So, guys, as a UPSC aspirant, you need to understand all these global dynamics, and it is connected with economy, it is connected with international relation. There are ethics dimension also involved, essay dimension also involved, and interview also is very important. So you need to have very good idea about India's competitive edge and the path forward, the way forward in its industrial growth. It's very crucial, not only for mains, it's for interview also. Okay, so go through this editorial so that, I hope you will get very good idea now. So I hope you understood and you got some value from this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you're looking for any mentorship program, get in touch with us. The details are given in the description. Check out that. See you in the next session.